Okay. So, good evening, everyone. And tonight we'll have the last of our Tuesday night classes until the summer holiday. So, it's nice to see many old faces and new faces tonight. And I've been teaching a course based on a book called The Art of Happiness, which is actually written by an American psychiatrist, but in conversation with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it contains a lot of very useful, very practical information on how to be more happy. So before going on to that, we usually start with some meditation to calm down and settle down our minds. Is that buzzing noise from outside or inside? Outside. Okay. Nothing we can do about it. Yeah. So first of all, let's just check in with our mind and why we are here. What is our reason for coming here tonight and sitting here in this group, in this gathering? So just ask yourself that question. Just see what comes up in your mind. Why did I come here tonight? And when you ask yourself that question, you might find that you already have a positive motivation for being here, wanting to do something beneficial for yourself, for others, for the world. But in case you don't, in case you maybe don't really know why you are here tonight, or maybe you came to meet a friend and don't have a clear idea of your motivation for being here tonight, it's always possible to change our motivation. Our mind is flexible, changeable. So we can always introduce new ideas, new thoughts, new attitudes. And anyway, we already, all of us do at least sometimes feel the wish to be of benefit. We wish to do good. We want to do good for ourselves, for our family, our friends, for our country, our society, for the world. So these kinds of feelings naturally rise in us at certain times. So what we can do is try to recall a time when we did feel that way, when we did have this wish to do something as much as we can that will bring more peace, more happiness, more benefit to the world, try to make the world a better place, try to make people more peaceful and happy and less unhappy and confused, angry, and so forth. So try to recall a time when you did have that thought or feeling or motivation in your mind. And since it is a thought or feeling that arises in our mind at least some of the times, that means it is part of us. It's a natural part of our mind. And so we can bring that back into our mind, kind of renew it or regenerate it in our mind right now, and make that our reason for being here tonight. Because what we're looking at here tonight is based on the teachings of the Buddha, which were given out of compassion for all living beings. The Buddha discovered a way to find ultimate peace and happiness and freedom from suffering. And then, out of compassion for others, for the world, he spent the remaining years of his life teaching how to do that. So, all the Buddha's teachings were given out of compassion, out of the wish to benefit all living beings. So, when we listen to, think about, and meditate on the teachings of the Buddha, it's good if we can try to have that same attitude in our own mind. So we can just think, may my being here tonight and what we do here tonight, may it bring peace and happiness and benefit to myself, to others, to the world. And if you're comfortable with the idea, you can also include the idea of enlightenment. May this help us all get closer to enlightenment. And then try to maintain that state of mind as much as you can for the rest of the evening. In other words, try to really feel a sense of kindness and concern and wanting to benefit, wanting to help, both towards yourself and towards the other people here in this room, towards the people outside, towards all other people, all other beings everywhere. Try to maintain this attitude of, I want to help, I want to benefit, I want to bring more peace and happiness. So this is what we call loving kindness in Buddhism. Loving kindness and compassion. It's that feeling of warm-heartedness, concern, and care. So try your best. It may not always be possible because sometimes irritation pops up in our mind. But even if that pops up, it's only transitory. It's only temporary. So we can remember this feeling of kindness and compassion and try to restore that in our mind. So now we'll start the meditation. And if you have some other kind of meditation that you know that you're familiar with, you want to do, then that's fine. Otherwise, we can do meditation on the breath, on the breathing, which means just allowing the breath to flow in and out in a natural way, not trying to interfere with or control the breathing, but just letting it flow naturally. And then watching the breath with the mind, paying attention to, observing, being aware of the breath as it's flowing in and flowing out. And when we watch the breath, we are actually watching sensations in our body related to the breath. We can't see the breath with our mind, but we can feel sensations in our body as the breath is coming in and going out. So just be aware of those sensations wherever you can feel them most easily, most clearly. So just be aware of the sensations as the breath is coming in and going out. And whenever you notice that your mind has drifted away from the breath to something else, like a thought, a memory, plans for the future, or a sound, or anything, any object other than the breath. As soon as you realize that has happened, just gently, in a kind way, not in a way that you're angry at yourself, frustrated with yourself, just patiently, kindly let go of that other object. Put it aside and bring your awareness back to the breath. And don't worry, even if you have to do this again and again, if the mind keeps wandering away from the breath to something else, it's completely normal. It's just the nature of our mind. It's what our mind is used to doing, to wander from one thing to another. So if that happens, just be aware of it and patiently put aside the other object and come back to the breath. And again, try to maintain this attitude of kindness and friendliness and care towards yourself, towards your body, your mind, all your thoughts, all your feelings, whatever comes up. Try not to get angry or frustrated at anyone or anything. thoughts and memories and other mental states are like clouds in the sky. Our mind is like the sky. It's naturally clear and spacious and vast and pure. And just like clouds come and go in the sky, they're not permanent, they don't stay forever. In the same way, thoughts and memories and other experiences, emotions come into our mind, but they don't stay permanently. They come and they go, they pass away, they're impermanent. So, thinking of our thoughts and memories and emotions as being like clouds can help us to not be so upset about them, not so caught up in them, and instead be able to let them go. Just make a note of whatever thoughts and so on you notice in your mind, and then let them go and come back to the breath. So there's just a few minutes left of the meditation. Try to really make good use of this last few minutes and try to really stay focused on the breath and keep coming back to the breath when the mind wanders away. Okay, so this is the 9th talk in this series, and the topic tonight is the process of change. But before getting into that, there's something left over from last week that I didn't have time to cover. So last week we were looking at the topic was how to find meaning in pain and suffering and how to transform pain and suffering and problems that happen in our life. So the Buddhist view is that suffering, which can include all kinds of physical problems as well as mental, emotional problems, many types of problems. So suffering is a natural part of life. It's something that everybody has to encounter. So it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're beautiful or not so beautiful, if you're famous or if you're nobody, if you're successful, if you're a failure, whatever kind of person you are, whatever kind of life you have, everybody has problems. So there's nobody who is able to get through life without experiencing problems or suffering. And that includes even the billionaires, the celebrities, the royalty, famous athletes, movie stars, musicians, and so on. So everybody has problems. But problems, difficulties aren't necessarily bad. It all depends on our attitude, how we look at them, how we deal with them, and how we use them. So even though probably most people, when problems happen, they get very upset and they may even get angry and may become destructive, even commit suicide or do harmful things to others. So people can react very badly when problems happen, which is understandable. Nobody likes problems. But on the other hand, um, in Buddhism and probably in most spiritual traditions, there are methods that one can use to deal with problems so that instead of becoming something bad for us and bad for others, it can actually become useful and beneficial. For example, we can learn to become more compassionate and more wise when we experience problems. So anyway, last week we were looking at some of the ways in which we can work with problems and transform problems so that they can be turned into something useful. So we looked at various methods, and there was one method I wanted to talk about and lead a meditation on, but we ran out of time. So I thought to do it tonight. So this practice, it's called Tonglen, which is a Tibetan term, and it means taking and giving. And basically the idea is we generate compassion. We meditate on compassion and generate a feeling of compassion, which means wishing others to be free of suffering. And then we imagine taking the suffering of others or one person. It depends, you know, how many people or how many beings you want to take the suffering from. It could be just one person or it could be more. But anyway, you imagine, you generate this feeling of compassion, like, oh, I feel so bad that you are suffering. I don't want you to suffer, and I would like to take your suffering away from you and even take it into myself, take it on myself. So you do that in your meditation and your visualization. So that's the taking part of it. And then by generating love, love is the wish for others to have happiness. So meditating on that, you imagine giving your own happiness to the others. So your happiness could include, your feelings of happiness, but also your good karma, uh, your resources. You can imagine, your money and property and so forth, and whatever good things you have, you imagine giving those to the other person or to the others that you're meditating on. So that's the meaning of giving and taking. And there's different ways that it can be practiced. One is, and this is actually recommended in the beginning, if you're not so used to doing this practice, you can start with yourself, using your own suffering, your own problems. And this is very, very practical. Whenever we are experiencing some problem, it could be a headache, it could be an ache in your body, pain in your body, it could be, problems in a relationship or problems in your place of living or problems with your boss or whatever kind of problem there is. So you think of that problem, that suffering. And our normal reaction when we have a problem is to want to push it away. Go away. I don't want you. I don't like you. We have this kind of aversion and rejection to our problems. We want to get rid of them. But that's natural, of course. Nobody likes problems. But the funny thing is that by trying to push away problems, sometimes they just get worse. They just get, bigger. They don't necessarily go away. And then on top of the problem, we have this agitation of, oh, there's this problem and I don't like it and I don't want it. So it's just like the whole thing escalates, the whole thing gets worse. So this is quite a radical attitude, very unusual, very opposite to what we normally do. So instead of trying to push away our problem, get rid of our problem, we accept it. So we can, this is a phrase the Dalai Lama recommends we can use. He says, may I, by experiencing this pain and suffering, be able to help other people and save others who may have to go through the same experience. So that's one way of saying it. You could use your own words, your own ideas, but basically the idea is instead of wanting to push the problem away, you accept it. You accept it. You say, okay, there's this problem in my life, this difficulty in my life. I'm suffering. It's not nice, but I understand that other people have problems too. I'm not the only one in the world who has problems. Other people have problems too. And some people have even worse problems than me. So this is actually a really helpful thing to think. It's psychologically, when you look at your own problem in relation to the problems that other people have, your own problem can seem much smaller. When you're only focusing on, oh, my problem, it's so bad, it's so terrible, oh, then it can seem really, really huge. Yeah. But when you turn your attention to others and you look at what other people are going through in their life, just listen to the news, read the news, all the refugees, all the people in Africa right now who don't have enough food to eat, or the people in Syria whose homes are just totally destroyed and their lives totally destroyed. So, in relation to those people, what you may be going through is probably much smaller. I don't think anybody in Denmark is experiencing such terrible problems as what other people are. So thinking in that way, then your problem may appear, well, not so bad. Actually, it's not that bad. So it can seem smaller. And when it seems smaller, then it can also seem more manageable. Instead of being overwhelming, huge, unmanageable, I can't bear this, I can't handle this, then it will start to seem smaller. And then you can feel, well, actually, it's not that bad. I can manage it. I can handle it. So this is one thing that's good to do as a lead up to this idea. So then you've already been thinking about these other people and the problems that they have. So then you can do this practice of just saying, I accept this problem. I accept it. I will bear it. I will experience it. I will go through it. And by doing that, by me experiencing this suffering, this problem, may the suffering and problem of all of those other people, or you could extend it to all living beings, all sentient beings, may all living beings' problems and difficulties and sufferings be relieved. May they all disappear. May they all become free of their suffering. So it's just something you're doing in your mind. It's just a mental thing. It's a change of your mind, a change of your attitude. And you can do it in just a couple of moments. You don't have to be in a formal meditation. You can just do it anywhere, in your office, on the bus, walking down the street, anytime. You can just do this, say these words to yourself in your mind. And sometimes my experience is sometimes it has a kind of magical effect. Sometimes the problem goes away. It just disappears. That doesn't always happen. And you shouldn't expect that to happen, because otherwise you might be disappointed. The problem might still be there, but your attitude towards it has changed. Instead of seeing it as something huge and horrible and unbearable and something you just want to get rid of, it's like, okay, it's there, but it's not really that bad, and I can manage it, and I can even use this problem in a way that helps me have more compassion and helps me be more helpful to others. So it gives you something to do with the problem, instead of just, oh, it's a nuisance, it's horrible, it's bad, nothing useful about it. You see, there's something useful about this problem. Does that make sense? It's kind of a really nice little method. Um, but this doesn't mean that when you have a problem, you should only do this, nothing else. Because, of course, if there are things we can do to solve the problem, like if you're sick, for example, then it's fine to go to a doctor, to take medicine, to get medical treatment for your problem. That's, His Holiness says this is not meant to be a replacement for problem solving techniques. So it's completely fine to try to solve the problem. But in some cases, there may not be a solution to the problem, or there may be a solution, but it may take some time before the solution works. Like if you have a headache, you take some medicine, but it may not go away right away. It may take a few hours before it goes away. So in the meantime, while it's still there, while the problem is still there, you can do this as a way of working with it, dealing with it. So it definitely helps your mind to be in a better state about the problem. And then this is a very simple way of doing Tonglen, and there's much more complex ways. In fact, in this book, there's a meditation that His Holiness was giving teachings in Arizona while Howard Cutler was interviewing him and preparing the material for this book. So one day in the teachings, His Holiness led this Tonglen meditation, and I thought maybe it would be nice for us to do it together. So I'll just read. You can close your eyes and meditate along with the words of His Holiness. So this is a somewhat more elaborate way of doing it than what's up here. So just do the best you can to stay focused and try to get some experience, some insight into the ideas. So in the traditional teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, the context of this practice of Tonglen is in developing bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, the wish to become a Buddha to help all living beings. And one of the main obstacles to developing this attitude is our habitual attitude of self-centeredness or self-importance, feeling that I am number one, I am the most important person in the world. So that kind of focus on me is an obstacle to really opening up our heart and our mind and focusing on others and working to help others. So the practice of Tonglen is actually a practice to help reduce our self-centeredness. So His Holiness says, begin by visualizing in front of you. On one side, it could be the right or the left, visualize a group of people who are in desperate need of help, who are suffering. They may be living under conditions of poverty, hardship, and pain. So you could think of some Syrian refugees or African people who are on the verge of starvation, whatever group of people you would like to imagine. So visualize a whole group of people who are experiencing extreme suffering. And then on the other side, visualize yourself in the mode of being very self centered, very much focused on me. I am most important. I am the center of the universe. So there are times when we are like that. We are just totally caught up in ourselves and our needs and our wishes and don't really think about others. So visualize yourself in that mode of being. And then see yourself in the middle between these two, between the group of suffering people on one side and the very selfish you on the other side. And see yourself in the middle as a sort of objective, neutral observer, someone who can see things in a more objective way. And then check in your mind, which side do you feel more inclined towards, more concerned about, more sympathetic towards? That group of very suffering people on one side, or yourself, a self-centered person on the other side? Whose needs or whose well-being seem to be more important? That group of people on one side or that one person on the other side? And now focus your attention on the group of the suffering people, the needy, desperate people. Direct all your positive energy towards them. And mentally give them all of your own good things, your resources, your money, your property, all your success, your good karma, your good energy. But try to feel how nice it would be if you could share all of that with them. And in that way, give them what they need and relieve their suffering. So, what you can do is you can imagine just creating whatever they need: food, clothes, shelter, just making those things appear and then giving those things to the people. And imagine them receiving those things and looking very joyful, very happy. And then imagine taking upon yourself their suffering. So, the traditional way that this is done is to imagine the suffering of the people that you're meditating on coming out of them in the form of something like smoke, dark smoke or fog. And then you take it into yourself, and you can imagine in your heart chakra there's something like a black rock or a black spot or a black hole in space, something that represents your traditional or habitual attitude of self-centeredness, self-cherishing, your ego, whatever it is that obstructs you from being able to really open up your heart with compassion and love and really help others. So whatever obstacles you yourself have, imagine those in your heart chakra in the form of this dark thing. And then when you take on the suffering of those other people in the form of smoke or fog, imagine it coming right into that place in your heart, absorbing into it. And then it all vanishes. Both your self-centered attitude, your ego, your obstacles, and the suffering of the others that you have taken on. They all just vanish. They all disappear into space. They become empty. They become non-existent. So now imagine that in that area of your heart chakra, there's space, clarity, peace, only love and compassion, free of ego, free of self-centeredness, free of greed and hatred. So you're able to just have a totally open mind, an open heart towards others and their suffering, and be able to be there for them and take care of them in whatever way they need. So there's many different ways of doing the practice of Tonglen. So that's one way, but there are a number of books where you can find more variety of ways of doing Tonglen. We did this actually a few weeks ago in the Thursday night class. We did a Tonglen practice. So, but this one that's here, this is actually a very practical thing. Like I say, you can do it just in your daily life whenever you're having some kind of problem. Okay, so now for tonight's class, to just start to get into this subject. So way back when we first started this class, and way back in the beginning of this book on the art of happiness, as a sort of introduction to this whole topic of how to be more happy, there was this quotation from His Holiness the Dalai Lama where he said, "I believe that happiness can be achieved by training the mind. One begins by identifying those factors which lead to happiness and those factors which lead to suffering." So this is very much the Buddhist approach, that within our mind is actually very complex. There's many different parts, many different aspects to it. And some of the aspects or factors or mental states that we have are conducive for happiness. For example, love, loving kindness, compassion. So those are states of mind that we have. And when those, they're not always in our mind, but when they are, when we have love, when we have compassion in our mind, then the outcome of those states of mind is happiness for ourselves and also for others. So we ourselves feel better, feel more happy when we can have love and compassion in our minds. And then there are other factors or states of mind that lead to suffering. One of the best examples is anger or hatred. So when that pops up in our mind, when our mind gets caught up in anger, hatred, or irritation, or dislike, aversions, impatience. So there's different degrees of anger. So when any of those types of feeling is present in our mind, then our mind is not happy and peaceful. It's agitated and unhappy. And so that leads to suffering. So the Buddhist view is whenever we have happiness or whenever we have suffering, it's mainly due to what's going on in our mind, these inner factors within our mind. So His Holiness says this is the first thing we need to do. We need to recognize which aspects of the mind are conducive for happiness, which ones are conducive to suffering, which brings suffering. And then the last paragraph says, having done this, one then sets about gradually eliminating those factors which lead to suffering and cultivating those which lead to happiness. So that is the way. It sounds so simple. So, I mean, this is what His Holiness says, but it's based on the Buddhist teachings. It's completely in accordance with what the Buddha taught, that the Buddha himself was once an ordinary person, an ordinary being like ourselves. He wasn't always enlightened and awakened, but he was an ordinary person who had problems and unhappiness and suffering and confusion. But through his practice of meditation, he found a solution. He found a way out. And then he realized that what he did was possible for everybody. So Buddhism, the Buddhist view, is that each and every person, and not just human beings, but also animals, all living beings, whoever has a mind, whatever living being there is that has a mind, that is sentient, that within our mind we have certain factors which, when developed, when cultivated, can bring us to the state of enlightenment. And on the way, as we're going on the way towards enlightenment, getting closer to enlightenment, our happiness, our joy, our well-being increase more and more and more. So we can definitely become more happy. And then if those, not everybody necessarily wants to become enlightened, but those who do want to become enlightened can do that. So it's just a question of learning how to do this. So His Holiness very much emphasizes the importance of training the mind. And this is a big part of Tibetan Buddhism, the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. Mind training or thought training or mind transformation is a whole body of teachings. It's lojong in Tibetan, which literally means training the mind. So then that was at the beginning of the book. Now, at the end of the book, Howard Cutler asks His Holiness, so how do we actually do this? What are the steps to doing this? So I'll just start this and then we'll have a break and continue after the break. So what are the steps in that process? First, His Holiness said, first what we need to do is to learn. We need some learning, some study, some education to know what are the negative mental states, the ones that lead to suffering, what are the positive ones that lead to happiness. and then how the negative ones are harmful and how the positive ones are beneficial. So there's actually a big body of teachings about this in Buddhism. Um, so by learning more about Buddhism, you can learn about this. But I think it's also in contemporary science and psychology. There's also a growing a body of material about these because in over the last I don't know that much about this, but just what I've heard over the last few decades, there have been a lot of studies done by scientists, psychologists, and so on the different kinds of emotions and which emotions, bring suffering and which ones bring happiness. So, just as an example, there's the book of Daniel Goleman's called Destructive Emotions. Has anyone encountered that book? Is it in Danish? Yeah. So that's that's about 15 years old now, but that's one of the books. It's actually written about a conference with the Dalai Lama and a number of scientists and philosophers and psychologists discussing destructive emotions. But I think they also discussed positive emotions as well. It's been a while since I read it, but when discussing destructive emotions like anger, then naturally you also talk about the positive counterparts to those, like compassion and love and so forth. So, so you can either do this learning from the Buddhist tradition or from Western psychology, Western science, or other traditions, whatever. So somehow find out which states of mind, which emotions are negative and lead to suffering, and which ones are positive and lead to happiness. And just to give you some idea of the Buddhist explanation, in Buddhism, there's often lists, many different lists of different things. So one list is what's called the three poisons. So these are said to be the three most negative or poisonous or harmful states of mind that we have. And they are ignorance, attachment, or greed, and hatred or anger. So ignorance is just, it doesn't mean not having an education, not knowing how to read and write. It doesn't mean that, but it means not knowing the true nature of things, not seeing reality, how things really exist. So that one is quite difficult to work on, not so easy to even recognize, but that's said to be the main negative mental state. It's like the root of all the others. The main problem that we have is that we just don't see reality. We don't see things realistically. And then while we're in this state of ignorance, then we get caught up in other emotions such as attachment or greed, where we want more and more and more things and experiences and this state of mind can be unending, unceasing. However much you have, you always want more. You're never satisfied, never contented. And you can even become manipulative and abusive towards other people in order to get what you want. So there's so many stories about that in the world of people doing horrible things to other people just to have more for themselves. Just really lacking compassion, lacking kindness to others. So that's a very poisonous state of mind. And then hatred, anger, it's also very clear how that is destructive, because that leads to things like war and terrorism and violence and murder and abuse and all kinds of horrible things that directly cause suffering to others. So those are said to be the three poisonous states of mind. And then there's another list, which is quite similar, but it adds three more on top of that, what are called the 6 root delusions. And so includes those three plus pride or arrogance. This is where we feel we are superior to others. I am better than other people. And it causes us to sort of look down on others and can even lead to mistreatment of others because we feel superior, I'm better, and I have a right to treat others in a not so nice way. So that can lead to a lot of problems as well in the world and society, in relationships. And then the last two are maybe a little harder to identify with. Afflicted doubt. um, there's different kinds of doubt, and some doubt is actually helpful. In fact, Buddha and the Dalai Lama and so on, they say we really should have doubt. We shouldn't just blindly believe what anyone tells us, including the Buddha. You know, he himself said, don't just believe what I'm saying, but investigate it. So we should have a certain kind of healthy doubt, curiosity, wanting to check, is this true or not? So that's not afflicted doubt. Afflicted doubt is when we have doubt, but it's we're more inclined towards the opposite conclusion. For example, you know, if somebody hears about enlightenment, you know, Buddhism says everybody has the ability to reach enlightenment. There's a state called enlightenment, and we can all reach it. And if someone says, "Oh, that sounds like a lot of rubbish," you know, where's the proof of that? Yeah. So the person has doubt, and their doubt is so strong they don't even want to investigate. You know, they just completely reject. Ah, that's rubbish, and they aren't even curious to check out if it's true or not. So that's the meaning of afflicted doubt. It's doubt in a very strong way, in a very extreme way, where you don't even want to know, you don't even want to think about, you don't even want to investigate if something is true or not. You just reject it. And then wrong views is kind of like that, but even in further extension of that. So that would be when you just completely outright reject something. You know, you say, okay, there's no such thing as enlightenment. There's no such thing as Buddhahood. There's no such thing as past lives and future lives. You just totally close your mind to such ideas. No such thing as karma. That's said to be the most dangerous one, is to reject karma. Because if you reject karma, that means you think that whatever we do won't have any results. I can do whatever I want. And that can lead to, not, it doesn't necessarily happen, but it could lead people to then think they can do whatever they want. I can kill people, I can steal, I can rob, cheat, lie, abuse. There won't be any outcome, any results to that. So that's said to be quite a dangerous wrong view, because there is karma. If you reject karma and you ignore it, then, you know, you might be creating a lot of bad karma and have to suffer the result of that. So anyway, these are just an example of some of the negative mental states mentioned in Buddhism. Another one, which isn't on this list, but it is on other lists, is jealousy or envy. And that's when we are dissatisfied with what we have and want what other people have. So comparing ourselves, we talked about this earlier in the book. You know, there's this tendency to compare ourselves with others. You know, and we see somebody who has more, who has better, who is smarter, has a bigger car, bigger house, more money, and so on and so forth. And we feel very dissatisfied with what we have. And that can also lead to jealousy or envy towards those who seem to have more, have better, and so on. That's a really painful state of mind as well. So before, oh, what's happening here? I didn't mean to jump to the next slide. So I thought we'll have a break now for about 10 minutes, and then we'll carry on with this afterwards. So there's tea and coffee and snacks upstairs. So then His Holiness says that after um, learning about which factors, mental states, are negative, are the cause of suffering, then we need to um, make ourselves familiar with what's wrong with them. Why do they cause problems? What kind of problems do they cause? So this is something we can do on our own, just through our own experience, our own investigation of our own, whoops, um, uh, our own experiences. But just to give you some idea from the Buddhist tradition, these are some things that are mentioned. And we, again, check for ourselves if they are true. So one of the problems is that they make our mind disturbed. So we can look into our own mind and just check when there's anger or when there's greed or when there's jealousy in our mind, what kind of effect does it have on our mind, on our mental state, on our mood and so forth. So if we do this, we might notice, this is certainly what I notice, they definitely make the mind disturbed and unpeaceful. They say it's a bit like when you put a pot of water on top of a stove, a fire. In the beginning, it's cool and calm and still, but after a while, it starts to boil, bubble, it gets very turbulent. So it said that the delusions or disturbing emotions have that kind of effect on our mind. They make it boiling, turbulent. Another thing is, this is a little more subtle, but they don't see things realistically. When we have anger, we did look at this already. And in fact, His Holiness mentioned American psychologist or psychiatrist who's done a lot of study of anger and says that when we're angry at somebody, we see the person as 100% bad, but 90% of that is projected by ourselves. There's only 10% bad there in the person. The other 90% is projected by our own mind. And His Holiness said, well, yeah, this is exactly what we say in Buddhism as well. We project a lot of negative things on other people when we're angry at them. So it shows that we're not seeing the other person realistically. We're not seeing them as they really are. So in other words, delusions or afflictive emotions distort our mind, distort our perception of things. So if you're concerned about that, then that's another kind of problem. They can cause harm to ourselves. So when we get angry, for example, we can sometimes become kind of careless and mindless. And even if we don't want to harm ourselves, I mean, sometimes people do. They do deliberately harm themselves when they're in a state of mental turmoil. But even if we don't want to intentionally, because we're so agitated that we make mistakes, we drive recklessly or do things recklessly, and then we can end up injuring ourselves. And also to others. So often the disturbing emotions, when they take over our mind, they cause us to act in ways and speak in ways that harm others, that do things that make others suffer, make problems for others. And they can also lead us to do negative actions, bad karma, killing, stealing, and so forth. So then if we create bad karma, then that means in the future, if we don't purify that karma, then we'll meet with more problems in the future. And then in terms of meditation, if we're interested in meditating and getting somewhere in our meditation, delusions can come up when we're meditating and cause our mind to be agitated. And then it's difficult to concentrate, difficult to get any kind of insights or realizations. So they disturb our meditation. And of course, we can deal with them when they come up in our meditation. There are things we can do to deal with them skillfully. But if we aren't able to do that, then our mind just gets totally agitated, angry, or full of attachment, desire, and that messes up our meditation practice. And then, therefore, because of that, they are obstacles to being able to attain higher states of mind through the practice of meditation, like calm abiding, which is single-pointed concentration. Special insight is the realization of the true nature of things, emptiness. And then the higher states of liberation and enlightenment. So these are just to give you some idea of why Buddhism says that disturbing states of mind like anger, attachment, ignorance, and so forth are problematic. And we need to work on them. So that was the first step, His Holiness said. We have to learn about what are the factors of the mind that lead to suffering and try to reduce those, which ones lead to happiness and try to increase those. And then other things he mentioned are important for this process is conviction, meaning a commitment to change our mind. And so this is something that would come about, I think, naturally. Once we do the study, the first step, studying and investigating which factors lead to suffering, which lead to happiness, we can really see that very, very, very clearly. It naturally leads to a sense of conviction, a feeling of, I really must change my mind. I really must work on my anger and not let myself, be the slave of my anger and so on. So I think this is a bit similar to somebody who has been addicted to something like alcohol or drugs for a long time, and then they come to feel this is really ruining my life. I have to stop this. I have to change myself. So they make this commitment to change, to say, I'm going to give up that habit. I'm not going to do that anymore. And in that kind of situation, many people anyway will seek help from outside. For example, Alcoholics Anonymous, drug rehabilitation programs, therapy, and so forth. When it comes to changing our mind, of course, there might also be such help available. For example, a therapist. Or in the Buddhist tradition, we usually have spiritual teachers that we go to for help. So they serve a similar role as a therapist. We go to them and talk to them about our problems, and they give advice, and then we try to practice what they teach and so on. So you can seek help from outside, or you can do it on your own, through practicing meditation, self-help books, and so on. So there's various ways you can make this change in yourself, work on this change in yourself. And then His Holiness says, he also mentioned determination. So this is like a further development of commitment. It's a sense of, I'm definitely going to do it. I'm determined to do it. And ideally, it's a long-term thing, because it takes time to change. It's not something we can do in 1 or 2 days. So we have to have real determination to just keep doing it, keep working at it until we reach our goal. And then the third step, he says, is action or effort, meaning, actually doing something, not just thinking about it. Oh yeah, I really would like to change my mind. That would be a great thing to do. But if we don't do something, then it's not going to happen. So this could involve making the decision to do some sort of regular practice, daily practice of meditation or study or whatever is suitable for you. But we have to actually do something to bring about changes in ourself, changes in our mind. So Howard Cutler said that with these steps that His Holiness mentioned, there's studies and research that show that, these things really are true. For example, with the first step of learning or studying, education, is Howard Cutler says, definitely, research shows that education helps people to have greater well-being. For example, they have no more self-confidence, they have more knowledge about skills they can use to cope with problems and resources where they can get help and so on. So the more education one has, then the more one has access to a better way of life, well-being. And these factors as well. For example, most social scientists and psychologists say that most of the behavior that we have and the experiences that we have are the result of learning and conditioning. Okay, so we do learn from others, and we are conditioned by our upbringing, our society, our culture, and so forth. And just as we have already learned how to behave in certain ways, we can also change that and learn new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving. So it's not like set in stone the way we are and unchangeable, but we can change. So our conditioning can be influenced by others and changed. And His Holiness also mentioned another factor, which is a sense of urgency, meaning, we really have to do it now, not leave it for some future time, which may never come. Because according to Buddhism, this comes, for example, in the teachings and meditations related to the preciousness of our human life, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, that we have this precious human life. And with this human life, we can do so many things, so many good things. So that gives us a sense of confidence and courage and joy. But the downside is it's not going to last forever. So we're going to die one day, death and impermanence, and we're actually getting closer to death every day. So bearing that in mind, reflecting on that, contemplating that gives us a sense of urgency that I really have to practice now, not wait till some time in the future, because it may not happen. So, and His Holiness said himself personally, he is inspired by this quotation from Shantideva, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It's something that he uses it like a prayer, a dedication prayer. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, that long may I too remain, in order to dispel the misery of the world. So His Holiness said this is something that he recites and thinks about and meditates on a lot, and that gives him a strong sense of inspiration and determination to work on himself and do as much as he can to work for others, to benefit others, to benefit the world. So I was thinking, maybe just to spend a little bit of time discussing these points. So if you could get into groups of 2s or 3s, and then just share with each other how you feel about this idea of changing your mind. Is this something you would like to do? Would you like to transform your mind? Why or why not? So give your reasons as to why you think the way you do. And then also talk about what, if you do have this wish to change your mind, to work on yourself, transform yourself, then where do you get inspiration to do this? What inspires you? What keeps you going and prevents you from giving up? So maybe 5 or 10 minutes, if we could just talk with each other about this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because like BS, the goal. Something very interesting. Well, when someone tells you the kind of a joke where when you hear it, where you just completely burst out laughing. That second when you're bursting out laughing, you're in excellent enlightened state. Because you're not thinking, you just hear the joke, it's so funny that you just, whoa! That, the mind hasn't come in yet. So someone told me that you actually get a taste of this.
Yes, that's what I because I don't see myself like a bad person, So there's another otherwise it wouldn't be like the problem is when we don't accept ourselves yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's like something like not that I think it's like not like and what way is like the goal the far end or the other end accessible some way momentarily.
Yeah, people do extreme sports for that too. When you're right up in the edge. That laser edge or surfers that go through that's supposed to be unbelievable. When there's waves circle. Something happens.
Like why do you want to
Totally changes that.
like you also say
Yes, always those experiences, yes.
very tricky. It's easier to pay attention
It's easier to see.
This is also so this thing of music, live music, the band is less predictable, and you're more or less on the edge. It's a recording that's not the same, even if it's a good recording.
because I feel like I see much better.
You can plan.
Oh yeah,
Nice but actually the best, most of the best is what I don't know. Very
Best moment in his life.
that's like
that's what some of the light, everything is like that.
maybe I'm talking about a bit more subtle. Now it has qualities of rise or
level.
Be
Like you just said,
our main experience.
because you don't expect
And that's our main
anything.
experience. Compassion.
Whatever happens,
Almost impossible to manage. Almost
but they're in
impossible.
that state
And
constantly.
if compassion is the ground. But
I
the
think
mind cannot have
I think also stating like motivation.
at the same time.
Just to see
Why there's so much weight on compassion, like yourself, and just calming, and you're trying to be.
Oh, yeah, well, you can't lose it.
Yeah.
See what is going on in the world, be an active one, because if we are
It's very good.
It's a good question.
but it's always
Something
that-
great for you doing something because you're still away ahead, way
How
ahead.
is that person? That's compassion. It should also be
So I show here this process of constantly becoming a better you.
will to recognize the recognition.
Also,
Not
in
necessarily.
the transformation, makes a big difference.
For me, it's like more about the understanding that another person is suffering.
Like someone like
Which is from your own experience.
Yeah.
Well, the basic level of survival is the strongest instinct.
and then the other person
It's
is
great.
fine.
But when I have an instinct, because I know what happens.
Yeah, but that, no, the hunger is the survival. Taking a breath, finding food if you're really hungry, that's the number one urge.
Yeah.
And then number two is
The very good point, so we'd like to talk about the relationship between empathy and compassion, how they are similar, how they experienced.
Yeah, it's explained in here.
Yeah, so very, it's certainly something that I look at. Both want to bring someone else directly. Some yogis are able to, you want to
Having experience.
go through an airport station, experiencing everyone else's turbulence.
I think it's also getting more and more like today, I just on the radio was a
Here, it's compassion is also simply giving people the space to feel how they feel without judgment, without reacting. You don't want to take it away from them, just allowing them to be like
The gifts is on, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I never feel go out because it's very special. I had a certain experience.
like seeing people suffering.
It's a good one.
Oh, yeah.
I've
met a couple of people, only two, people who had been married about 30 or 40 years. They said every single day they felt more involved with the person in the days before. That is one of the most difficult things.
Yeah.
Because normally
It's
it's
also
also
actually like
such a high emotion, and then you get more deeper feelings.
like attachment
More routine.
Yeah.
Whereas if you could actually have that.
But I don't think it's an energy. I don't know. I just don't think that's a realistic. I don't think it's
Some
like
people start by fixing other people's
continue like that. I mean, it's like
also in the
No,
West,
no,
they're
no.
afraid to
But
take
some people said that every single day they're
so much.
Yeah.
I've only had two in my life.
Yeah.
Action outside.
But I don't think it's. I don't think it's.
Have you started home? The Christian.
I think it is romantic love. I mean, I think it's
Very much
Well, actually, it probably starts here.
Exactly. I
It keeps going deeper though. It's not like.
That's the case. That's the like. It's a different kind of love. Like
So
the
they don't
other guy
really
is
see
so
it.
spark.
Yeah.
So that romance thing. And then
What do we see by when we see
yeah. I think that sort of falling in love is more like it's a kind of mediation. It's instinctual, right?
That's fun.
That's why it's compassion sexual.
Being able to arise.
You can catch something or actually
I saw these.
have
That probably wasn't enough time to really do justice. This is a big topic. Anyone have any question or want to share anything from your little discussion? Huh?
We have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about the relationship between compassion and empathy. To which extent does it overlap? Is there a difference?
Yeah, it seems that from what I've read and heard, there can be different understandings of what empathy is and also what compassion is. But one explanation is that empathy is simply the ability to understand what another person is feeling. And that could be any kind of feeling. It could be joy, it could be sadness, it could be hurt, so all kinds of feelings. So I think it's actually a natural human ability. We have mirror neurons in our brain, so we can know what others are feeling. So that's empathy. So it's just quite a more basic thing. Whereas compassion grows out of empathy. So when we become aware that somebody else is unhappy, is hurt, is sad, is suffering, then we are moved, touched, and we feel for them, and then we want to help them. So it's more specifically about the feelings of sadness and suffering that come into play, whereas empathy could be about any kinds of feelings that others are experiencing. So that's one explanation. But there could be other explanations of those two states of mind. Bob?
Okay, yeah, we were talking about the process. So I said the process best the goal. You have the process, you have the goal, and this gentleman believes that for him the process is the important thing of process of constantly becoming a better you. That's how I paraphrased it. But yeah, I was going to also ask you, how do you think that the two relate to each other, the process and the goal? I mean, do you consider the process to be more important than the goal, or is the goal like the magnet that's creating the process?
I mean, in Buddhism, the goal is enlightenment or liberation, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking about some other goal, or?
Oh, yeah, I think what this gentleman was just saying was for him the process of becoming a better you, like
better person.
better person each day. Constantly becoming a better. That for him is the most important.
Yeah.
That's because I think the enlightened state is pretty far.
Yeah, for sure. Be more realistic. Yeah.
Is for me.
Yeah. 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 It's good to focus on right here and right now, what I can do today, because enlightenment is a long way off. But it's still good to have that long-term goal, to feel there is a goal that one is working towards. And I was reading, I can't remember, it was actually a Theravada teacher talking about, I don't know, he used this analogy of, let's say you're in a car towards a mountain. There's a mountain in the distance that you're driving towards. That's where you want to reach. So you have that there as your goal, but you can't be constantly focusing on that, because you have to pay attention to the road and your car and the speed limit and all these kind of things. So if you're just focused on the goal, you can mess up the present. So it's good to have both there, to have the awareness there is a goal that we're working towards, but we need to be attentive to right here and right now, and make sure that we are moving correctly towards the goal. Otherwise, we may go off the cliff. So I thought that was a nice analogy. That both are important. But the most important thing, I think, is the process.
I was just getting a picture when you were talking of The closer you got to the mountain, the stronger the pull would be.
I mean, they do say at a certain point on the path that you reach a point of no return. I mean, it's a long way along, but there is a point at which you'll never go back. You're definite. So it is a little bit like that. You know, you just keep going almost automatically towards enlightenment. There's no turning back. Even if you change your mind, you say, no, I changed my mind. I don't really want to become enlightened. But you can't do that. So I think it's because the factors within yourself that are needed to reach enlightenment have become so strong, so powerful that you just keep going in that direction. But that's quite a high level. So you have to do a lot of work to get to that point.
He was saying that tongue in was the fastest way to become enlightened, if you would just be practicing it constantly.
Yeah.
And you could be at the point where you're talking to the guy in the bank and you're in such a big fight that he punches you in the nose and you're still doing the tongue then towards him, bringing his love and light on the face.
Okay, I just want to do one. This is the last slide. Just do this quickly because it's important. We need to have realistic expectations. So we're talking about, going through a process of changing ourselves, improving ourselves, trying to have less negative emotions, more positive ones. But we have to be realistic. It takes time to change the mind. We can't do it overnight. There's this Tibetan saying, having negative states of mind is like rolling a boulder down a hill. Having positive states of mind is like pushing a boulder up a hill. So if you ever find it, difficult to generate positive states of mind, it's completely normal. It's completely natural. You're not the only one. So this is what Tibetans have been saying for a long time. And we fall into negative states of mind so easily, just like a boulder rolling down the hill. And they say the reason for this is because of our past lives, because we've had many, many lives before this one. And most of the time we are acquainted with negative states of mind. So that's why they come up so easily and naturally. But we can change that by making ourselves familiar with positive states of mind, love, compassion. That's why we meditate on love and compassion and recite the four immeasurable prayer and so on and so forth. So we're trying to plant these imprints of positive states of mind. The more we do that, then those will come up more easily and more naturally. And the negative ones won't come up so much. So it's really a process of habituation or familiarization, training ourselves. And this is a quotation from the Western tradition. Pity me that the heart is slow to learn what the swift mind beholds at every turn. So in a simpler way of saying it, our mind is fast. We can understand things really easily and quickly. But when it comes to changing our heart, meaning like our feelings, our emotions, that takes more time. So we can quickly understand, oh yeah, anger is really bad. I don't want to be angry anymore, but it's still there in our heart. So it does take time. It takes time to change the mind. And as Oina said, we need a balanced attitude. We need to have the hope that we can change. Don't give up hope. Hope is important, but we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations that change is quick and easy. So it does take time, and we need to just keep going. And just one last, this is from me, not from His Holiness, but because many of us in the West have this habit of being critical of ourselves, then this can creep into this process of change. If we think, oh, I really want to change myself, I want to be a better person, I don't want to be so selfish and angry and so forth. And then when we see these things in ourselves, selfishness and anger and so on, we can beat ourselves up. So don't do that. That's not that's not the right way. We should be kind to ourselves. Treat ourselves with kindness and patience and not with beating ourselves up. Okay, so we've kind of rushed through this. It's an important topic, but I just wanted to be sure to say these things. before we finish tonight. And also just to mention that, well, this is our last class until the autumn, until August. We'll start again in a new place. So that will be announced on the website, I guess. Yeah, the new program. But we still have one more program before the end of the season, and that is a retreat, Lamrim retreat. It'll start on the weekend. This weekend, yes, in a few days. And so it's mainly for the people who've been following the basic program, which started in January, but it's also open to anyone who has some familiarity with the Lamrim, the path to enlightenment, and is interested in doing more meditation. So we'll do a number of meditations during the day. We'll also be doing some calm abiding practice. That's for the development of concentration. So we'll do some calm abiding meditation plus some analytical meditation on the Lamrim topics. So you can find more information on the website, and also if you want to register, that's the place to register.
What is the weekend? Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah, it's actually going to go from Saturday until next Thursday, the 1st to the 6th of July, but probably most people won't be able to do more than the weekend. So if you can only do the weekend, that's fine. And if you can do longer, that's fine as well. The 6th of July is actually the Dalai Lama's birthday. So I thought that would be a nice day to end, and we can dedicate all our merit, all our positive energy for his long life. Any questions about it? Any?
Can one come on different days, or is there a different?
Well, we don't want people to just drop in and out. If you do the weekend, if you do the full weekend, then you can come on the other days as well. But you can't just come on Monday if you haven't done the weekend. So, but yeah, I mean, for example, one person said she can do the weekend and she can do Tuesday and Thursday, but she can't do other days. So it's after the weekend you can do part of those days.
Well, those days can be full days too.
No, until 5. Saturday will be from 9 until 8 at night, and then the other days will be 9 until 5. Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't made the exact schedule. I'm still working on that, how long to make the sessions and the breaks and so on. But it'll be quite a few meditations morning and then afternoon, and probably also time for discussion and question and answer.
I wanted to say something about the new place, unless there is more questions about the retreat. So as you know, most of you will resign from this place, and by the end of July, we'll have to move out. And we found a new place, or rather, we're renting ourselves in another Buddhist center called Sangye Khadro, which is close to Nørreport Station in Frederiksborg. And so from after the 22nd of August, we'll continue the program on, there'll be a regular program on Tuesdays, actually being a little bit different in sort of the structure than previously. It will start at 6, so there'll be 1 hour of meditation from 6 till 7, then half an hour break, and then 1 hour teaching from 7:30 till 8:30. So one can like do the meditation teaching or both, or go in the break or whatever one wants. That'll be on Tuesdays, going from end of August, and then on Thursdays in September only, the beginning at least, there'll be a program on emptiness teachings from 7 till 9, and then Sangye Khadro, she leaves for Israel for some months there at the end of October, and another teacher, Stefan Pende, he will then take over teaching on Tuesdays, and we'll have some visiting teachers while Sangye Khadro is away. So that's sort of broadly the schedule for after summer, but please keep an eye on the website and come to the new place at the end of August.
Also, I made these survey forms. Some of you may have already filled it out, but if you haven't, you can take one of these. So it's just an opportunity for you to express what you are interested in. So then we'll try to we'll try to accommodate everyone's wishes in the autumn program. Provide what you would like to learn. So before we do that, let's make a dedication of the positive energy from tonight's session. So we've come together, we generated a positive altruistic motivation at the beginning, and then we did some meditations and listened and talked about these teachings. So we've created some very good energy here tonight, what we call merit in Buddhism. This is positive energy that brings about positive results, happiness and peace, and helps us get closer to enlightenment. So it's good to share this positive energy with others, with all living beings, wishing that they will be able to experience greater peace and happiness and have less suffering and confusion, and that they too will get closer to enlightenment. So you can just do that mentally. Imagine sharing our positive energy with all living beings with this positive aspiration for their peace and happiness and ultimately enlightenment. Okay, thank you. Good night.